Today's devotion is titled God Meets Us Where We Are. And we're on day 194, and we're on July the 13th if you're following along on the calendar. And today's morning rinse is Judges 4 through 7. Today's featured verse is Judges 6:37. Behold, I will put a fleece of wool on the threshing floor, and if there is dew on the fleece only, and it is dry on all the ground, then I will know that you will deliver Israel through me as you have spoken. Do you ever hear God's voice so clearly that there is no doubt at all, like none whatsoever, that it is his voice? Whether that be, confirmation through his word, or whether that be through someone else confirming a prodding that's in your heart and confirming what God's talking to you about, and he's using someone else to confirm that it's there, or even just this still small voice speaking inside of you. I mean, do you know that it is God? Well, we learn to know his voice as we grow closer and closer to him every single day. However, just because we hear his voice, that does not mean that we always listen or believe each time he speaks to us. That's where faith grows. But we all know the story of Gideon. If you grew up in church, you heard this story. It was pretty popular as one of the children's stories. And like many of us today, he was someone, a leader nonetheless, who needed signs of confirmation from God that he was actually hearing his voice. And so, sometimes we even can feel a little guilty that, oh my goodness, I'm not sure if that's God's voice, or, I need some kind of confirmation of that. And sometimes it is definitely something that we need in order to make sure that what we are hearing is truly him. And then sometimes it's just, overkill almost. But we've heard about the story of Gideon. And in today's morning rinse, we read of several examples where Gideon asked for these signs. And the first example was when God called him to be a warrior and fight for the people of Israel. And in his reply, Gideon used two excuses. His first excuse was his father's family was not very influential in the city. And the second excuse was that he was the youngest in his family. So you can read about that or recap that in Judges 6:14 through 22. Well, Gideon clearly heard God telling him to go deliver the people, because he answered God and, said these excuses. And yet he still asked for a sign. Isn't that, so human of us? We hear God. We know that it's his voice. We make excuses, but then we want a sign that it was his voice. I mean, the second example was when God told him to go fight Midian, and he assured Gideon that he would win. Gideon, for reasons probably due to fear, asked for yet another sign. So he put a fleece of wool outside and asked God to keep the fleece dry, while the ground all around the fleece of wool would remain wet with dew. And even though God answered this request, and God did exactly what Gideon said, will you do this? God answered. Gideon again asked for a sign by requesting the following morning that the fleece then remain wet with dew and the ground all dry. Sometimes we ask for signs from God to boost our faith, but sometimes we ask for signs due to fear or lack of commitment to what God is actually asking us to do. Imagine this. Maybe Gideon didn't want to do the things that God was asking him to do, and so therefore he was prolonging it and, asking for these signs. And, maybe he had some hope that there wouldn't be an answer, knowing in his heart that there would be an answer. I don't know all of that. But God will give us what we need as we are growing in him. Just like he met Gideon multiple times and gave him signs multiple times even in the midst of Gideon giving excuses and, prolonging the obedience, God met him where he was at. But if we continue asking God for signs, even after God has told us something, it can be a very strong inward issue of doubt or even unbelief. And God was not mad at Gideon for asking for these signs of confirmation. In fact, he met Gideon where he was, giving him what he needed to grow in his faith. And that is a beautiful picture of God. God meets us where we are so that he can give us what we need. I love that. And, if God did it for Gideon as a leader of the army and a leader of the people there, he would absolutely do it for anyone else, and we don't have to be a leader. We don't have to be of any kind of, significant hierarchy in leadership at all. We just come to God as we are, and he will give us what we need. He's not afraid of where we're at. He's not afraid of, our lack of faith or our struggles. He's not afraid of that. He wants to give us what we need in those moments. And sometimes those moments are a direct cause of our own personal choices. And sometimes they're a direct cause of, consequences or circumstances that are in our lives around us that we had no control over. We don't know. But how we respond to all of those, situations and those life circumstances, how we respond to them is where we are at in that moment. And God will meet us to give us what we need to grow in our faith. I love that. So today's challenge to dig deeper is to ask yourself, are you afraid of something that God is asking you to do? I mean, I can tell you I've been there, and there's some things that God's asked me to do that have been scary. And if that's you right now, I can 100% relate. And I mean, do you ever feel you have heard God's voice and still have a hard time believing that it's God's voice? I mean, that's another situation. Sometimes he asks us what to do and we're afraid of that. And then other times we have a hard time believing that it's his voice. Whatever situation it is, take this to God and ask him to help you overcome the fear and the lack of trust that you have in his voice. And he will answer you. He will meet you where you are and give you what you need. And I love that about his character. So that challenge for you today is there something that God is asking you to do? And you know it deep in your heart and you're afraid. Or you're just not fully believing it's him, and yet, you kind of know it is, but yet you're not for sure, and you need a sign and all that. That is your challenge, to address that and to ask yourself those questions. And then when you pull out your journal tonight and you reflect on all the things that God's talking to you about, did you learn anything today about your level of faith? Are there any seeds of doubt that are inside your heart on the things that he is asking you to do? Are you still afraid of those things? Write down how your day went in these areas of growth. And I hope that today inspired you. As we continue to grow, we're going to hear stories of, leaders and people that are in the book of Judges who needed help in their faith. And it's okay to look at those people, and it's always good to relate to where we are at in our faith, but he will always meet us where we are and give us what we need. Of course, in the show notes, the link is there to get my devotional, and certainly invite people along on the journey of reading through the Bible in a year, and invite them along. And until tomorrow, keep rinsing, reflecting, and repeating. God bless you.